All right. Good morning. All right. Let's start with Lamrim Kappa Guru Yoga. All right. Good morning. From the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of the Shita, on the peak of cloud resembling clump of extremely white fresh curd, king of Dhamma and Nisim Losan Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on the lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit from a mind of faith, please abide for 100 years to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanation is its ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless times, I convey each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strive for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and may your freedoms and richnesses meaningful. By abandoning the 8 worldly concerns, Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigrated beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of the perfect, pure Losan Drakpa's teaching to shine forever. Sashi Poki Junshi Meto Ramri Rabling Shi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindu Mikde Owa Irdokulamda Shila Chuparsho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lamrim Kappa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all the sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one, Losan Drakpa, who had a morality of eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the son of the victorious ones, and completed the yoga of the 2 stages and supreme bliss of emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure father and sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, color of milk, follows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and their imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. I'm going to do the 5-line mitzvah. Mimete wete chinchin rezi, jime kimbe wapo jampe ya, dubu malu jumze sanweda, kanchin kibe tungen tungapa, losan drape shavla sawade, mimete wete chinchin rezi, jime kimbe wapo jampe ya, dubu malu jumze sanweda, kanchin kibe tungen tungapa, losan drape shavla sawade, mimete wete chinchin rezi, jime kimbe wapo jampe ya, dubu malu zeda, kanchin kibe tungen tungapa, losan drape shavla sawade.
Sanji Chodan Soji Chonula Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsunche Dagi Chushi Gibin Sonum Jolan Beji Sanjin Drubara Sho Sanji Chodan Soji Chonula Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsunche Dagi Chushi Gibin Sonum Jin Jolan Beji Sanjin Drubara Sho Sanji Chodan Soji Chonula Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsunche Dagi Chushi Gibin Sonum Jin Jolan Beji Sanjin Drubara Sho 강기 투즈니 존에 다와 탐제 밤비처럼 담비춘 된제 거담제 라 창제로 Good morning everyone.
Hey, Jesus and his disciple.
Hi Mela. Mela.
How old is Mila now? 4 months?
4 months.
That's cool.
니동 뉴스자치기 네 다와시 로사소스더라. 니동 뉴스자치 센터 다와 뒤마다 하면서 니동 뉴스자치 센터 왔으나라.
So she's 4 months old, right? So it's April 2021. 4 months have already gone by in the year of 2021. We have 8 months left, right?
다들이 먼저 참디 람름 드링크 제롬식다 람름 드링크 아니 템벌은 주고 고탐바 잠도 잠와세티 and some telelede yusra.
Anyway, we're going to continue with Lamrim Kappa's presentation of the states of the path to enlightenment. So we've been looking at a text that is called the medium or middling presentation of the states of the path to enlightenment. We've already covered a few sections, and today we're going to pick up on the section that teaches refuge, which is the gateway to the Buddhist practice. Let's look at the outline in front of us. Where it is? There it is. Where is it? So we are going to look at explanation of how to rely on the method. Let's make it slightly bigger. Explanation of how to rely on methods for the happiness in future worlds or future lives. There are two main sections to this point. Relying on the methods for the happiness of future worlds, training in going for refuge, the holy gate for entering the teachings, and then generating the faith of conviction in actions and their effects.
Temple go so the Sanji temple jukes Sanji temple juice and Sanji church chebi the any church that Sanji church cheba church nyams lamba temple juice no Sanji church cheba Sanji church nyams lamba they are kogogras.
Now, when Lamrim Kappa begin this section that comes under the heading of training in going for refuge, the holy gate for entering the teachings. Refuge is the gateway for not only the Buddha Dhamma, but more specifically to the practice of the Buddha Dhamma. So the gateway for your practice is going for refuge.
Tirdenza nganzu sanji chu jangma sanji chu chebi kyabamando as ngebamando as ra ta sanji chu chegi yoda mesadi ani kyamru gyule yemek ton sanji chuba yemedi pi sanzam da masuna get da masuna di ani kyamru yemek toni chegi yores.
So here we study the Buddha Dhamma, but studying the Buddha Dhamma does not necessitate you being a practitioner of the Buddha Dhamma. So if you wonder, what's the dividing line between studying the Buddha Dhamma and putting it into practice? The dividing line, the entry gate to the practice is going for refuge. So if you go for refuge, it makes you a Buddhist practitioner, a practitioner of the Dhamma. Whereas if you haven't done so, you're not yet a practitioner of the Buddha Dhamma. So you can study that. It doesn't mean to say that you put it into practice. What the gateway is for your practice is going for refuge.
Teresa sanji gi sanji chu yakbu chipigila ya ani chendu yongi jimbaina ta chendu yongi jimbaina ro ani ngela ya ani chi sanji chu tengi tembari ani tembigi ani chudri ani chubigi tsuji nyamslen chini ani pigi ani chugi nyamne be ani pu thabo chik rangula ya nga dengi ani phabi gendu disumdi ngunzi yabu chegoya da ngunzi bitone tele ya ngone tani same thing ani ichi yobachi machong pardo ani chi ta che namda chedi kabu berendo asra.
So then if you wish to build up a good practice of the Dhamma, what you need to begin with is to look at the one that taught this set of teachings, the teacher. Then the teachings, which we call the Dhamma, and the community of those who have put it into practice and have done it well. This is the community of the Arya Sangha. So first of all, we need to understand what they are. We need to recognize what they are, but also the trust in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is necessary for pure practice of the Dhamma. Without having trust in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, it'd be hard to think that we can have a pure and excellent Dhamma practice.
Terda tindrichi yongbalaya ani same dini da ji yiche tsama yongbalaya ani nganzuta ombutukbo yimbayana ani chikpi mi shenki da jesun jenchin ani ko drogyo de tsambala chima chinchinji mashinaya ani pe yiche shukchenbo yongya tindri yongyo rasta ombu nombo chikra ombu nombo penata chunjung kone pe ani lobjong da pi odintri ya ani chalong chongdengi mijin bayna chi ani mi gi laba chamji gi lamsang yichi cheto ya khabu yoras da dintri gi midi gi ani thangbo sanji gi chodi jang goya di jawrmuji di ta do sungu dula ngone gi phigila ya shimju chonde sanji gi chu jang goya di pe masu kechim reshas ro.
So for that, for a good Dhamma practice, we need to make sure that the trust that we build is a correct sense of trust. And in order to build that sense of trust, we might apply two approaches to that. So roughly speaking, we can speak of two types of practitioners having two types of approaches. First one is someone of duller faculty. Such a person would be listening to an explanation that is given by someone else. And even if they don't understand that explanation deeply, they will follow that with a deep sense of trust, right? So they have a deep sense of trust, even without understanding the explanation, they will still follow the teachings. That's one type. The second type is someone of sharper faculties. And a person of sharper faculties will, first of all, study. They will not just trust certain teachings because they were taught by another person. First of all, they will study those sets of teachings. And once they understand that, they will build up the trust. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama then therefore said that, particularly at this point in time for us, it's important that in our approach to the Dhamma that we begin with study.
Tire bena dalang ngara samjures ra ngindu sta ngandelen da lokhashi jinroenza chik nganzu longbada chik phebada chigi ni mandrawe khawadi bena nga salon chongsa gi longbadi gi ngada ngadrewe gi chik lochog mimang chelya chitang gi pi chichokki ani lobjong ragyo mares lobjong chigyo mares medi chigyo mar di ganla chik ani phama gingore chik yolong khorani chik sanji gi chusla di peshu chik ani za chimu tsidya yinza rangshin gi pi senamandu chik ani gyunsen manto na ya ani tebashuk chembu chike de chik yungu yores ko kuyuk tok ta ani lomba dindila ya ani di medi sambala 다 소수 피기기 아니 시니 대버터버치 마요나 아니 가서 다지 피기기 유롱기 피기기 지 검시다 딘지 토네 산지 출려야 대바용야디 빼면서 가보러 왔어 되면서 인직민직이 장고야디 산지 출려야 대바용야 산지 출 맞잖아 갈카부 쇼진 바디 통구도스라.
Geshe has been here for a few years already, and he says that, roughly speaking, looking at Tibetan community, Tibetan society, and people living outside of Tibetan society, like, for example, us, we can see that our orientation and our backgrounds are different. In a sense that in Tibet, people, roughly speaking, are not greatly educated, particularly when you look at their Dhamma education, Dhamma knowledge. By and large, the general public is not informed, is not educated in the Dhamma, but still, since the culture and the tradition in Tibet is quite specific to Tibet, so in terms of place and time, people live in strong family, it's a very family-oriented society. So you follow your ancestral tradition. So since your parents have such a deep faith in the Buddha Dhamma, and they consider that to be so precious, then you yourself also consider that to be very precious. So this is how people develop deep sense of trust in the Dhamma, generally speaking, in Tibetan community. But here, our situation is different. It's not our ancestral tradition. So therefore, here it is really important that the faith that we develop would be an informed faith, that we will be a faith that is born from knowledge. It'd be hard to expect that we will have a similar type of faith, similar type of trust, that is type of an ancestral trust when you look at Tibetan society. Here, it's likely that it's not going to happen. It's quite difficult for something like that to occur. So it's really important, first of all, that we make sure that we become informed, that we study, so that we allow that to inform our faith.
Bena sogyung togi pi tachi ani teba shaktanti and me tene jani pi ani shin teba toya chagend mena and teba gia chagem ti kabushujik ra kanzana da chunjung군 lobjong cheni pigila ya chik ani karsawarda samlu chitang samlu natsu de yagbushoj longche ani chug nedung tole timedi ani sugyung tebachiya da chik di pigi yichetsam ki tonin rohedi kabushoj chagdo asdra tinzata ani tes janshabayna yang anzo nanshin gi pigila ya tuzumambu shoj tani ani janggoyagi tiyo mar sangudus kansan ko chinchung kon lobjong chin ya chalong chong jang miti ani lobjong shambajile ya khacho baina ani lamsan gyogbo shiyagi tabshi jiyoras dijidige ani ngesambala ya chik ani lombon dindrile ya ampigi wang da chik ani chik dombala soba ani tre debale 최랑 비게 뭐저 제디 아니 개체슈 인사를 삼성으로 라 유무소소인 바냐 담보 개체슈디 산지 가르송 요메 디약부지장 되니 아니 오늘 단이 신이 대버터비거들 되니 동버슈야리 왕슈야로 소바 제바이나 되니 오늘 퍼섬 소바 차사리 삼성 어 딘디 소바 신이 tro송스
Since our tradition is not such that we have this natural faith in the Buddha Dhamma, it is likely that strong trust will not arise on its own accord. So without providing faith with the conditions that are conducive for the development of faith, it is likely that that sense of trust will not arise on its own accord. So for us, it's important that we begin with study. And this is something that we're used to from young age. So from young age in our education system, we were trying to develop some ways of thinking. So Geshe reckons that since we're so conditioned to develop our way of thinking, the study of the Buddha Dhamma for us will not be that complicated. It wouldn't take very long time. So if we just make sure that this is where we begin, with first of all studying, thinking about it, then Geshe reckons that you could say, relatively speaking, in a shorter span of time, we can develop understanding that will inform our faith and trust in the Dhamma. So first of all, we study. In that sense, you can say that for us currently, studying is more important than taking vows or receiving empowerments. So particularly in this place, if we begin with, first of all, studying, then later on, naturally, we will come to take vows or to receive empowerments. For the time being, Geshe reckons, and this is something that he wanted to share with us, that when we create these perfect conditions for our spiritual development, we begin with studying. Vows and empowerments can come later on.
sonde sondi tenangla shi netsu deni tensiba ane denjin kowan judo chijing semi chami kyapsum ya ane teba tembu yongya da kecheshi resong dedi tangone chanige ane tachi turubda tumbige ane chejangdange tatik labja chodu gyobach ane techagi yosari samgudusra
죄송한데 pending chibdun chapsan de demban shi dembani yamana pending chibdun 나는 직되는 선열
chitang
chidanchana
din domnena delishonda.
His Honor has composed a prayer that was translated into English as the illuminating the threefold faith, a prayer in which he supplicated the 17 Pandits of the Nalanda tradition. And in the summary of this prayer, he spoke about the importance of those Pandits in terms of teaching us the very basis, the foundation, the two truths, and the paths that we need to develop in our mind that are based on the two truths, and within them, how we then find safe direction in the objects of refuge, the three jewels, and so forth. So this approach that is based on critical analysis on the basis of the teachings of the 17 Pandits of Nalanda is something that is suitable, particularly to this point in time. An Indian master called Vasubandhu said with respect to entering the teachings that the teachings of the Buddha are of twofold. There are teachings as scriptures and teachings as realizations. So we study those teachings and hold them as scriptures. And then through our practice, we hold them as realizations.
아니 denji chungor di redo asra denji chungurgi joja demba shitigi nesu di yakbu jambayna ani sanji chu tamji dinala dugdus ro di toni ani demba shi songingi ani demba dia ani demba shanda mandavik demba kepardu paba imbachik di toni nge tugdus ani demba di sonbigi ani chu dia chik chu namda jimba pigi ngone tan 딱지 심주배 영이 균생 영인기 아니 취지 임바디야 아니 대식 토닝 신고도스 로 데서 디냠슬람 비겐딩 임바이나야 어 삼기 메케바지 임바디 아니 대식 토닝 신고도스 데서 아니 땅아주 뎀바시 로뒤 딱도 상로 땅사기 비기 심어조디 아니 뎀바시디 임바디 다 세부쇼레스 로
So we spoke about teachings as scriptures and teachings as realizations. At the end of the day, it begins with, first of all, looking at the first teachings that the Buddha gave, which are teachings on the Four Truths. So the Buddha turned the wheel of Dhamma, and he did that 3 times. And the first one is turning the wheel of Dhamma of the Four Truths. And the subject matter, obviously, of those teachings are the Four Truths. So when you study the teachings on the Four Truths, you come to see that all the other teachings that the Buddha gave, all of them are included within the Four Truths. And through that, you can come to appreciate the uniqueness of the Buddha. Particularly when you compare the Buddha to other teachers, you can see how special the Buddha was from the perspective of teachings, the Four Truths. And through that, you see the purity of the Dhamma. And also, you see that the approach that you have to the Dhamma is based on critical analysis, it's based on reasons, which is also something that helps you to see the value of the Dhamma. So you see that through the Four Truths, and therefore the Four Truths for us become the foundation.
그래서다 비기 뎀바시 남샤디 오늘 타니기 다 균세 여바치 남샤 태기 여바이나 아니 산지 취어디 균세 뎀바이 바치 뎀바시 남샤디 태기 메바이나 아니 산지 취어디 균세 메바치 딘디 차던도서 딘자 응안수기 다 덴시디 다 진고 당본데다 아니 산지 좀 된데나 덴실라비요레 아니 पेन धांधी चले जाता जावर मुझे बाइने या खद्दू ये ना था चिक डेंबा शीख थोने अने नांजू ngodu chego ya de kechim bu shu resha sene pe ane ngaran rang la ya ngus ro ni don chugo la ya ngus song songs ane ngege de yon chi ane lokashi jirin la ya ane lamrom ngodu de zo nge denji thone shu ins ya shu de pe tu ni wo na chin ngal an be cha den jambal la jajin bet drikshas de kechim bu shu reshas o dindi song songs dinza kanji ane 산지 추억 비기 아니 싸워도 마선디 아니 뎀바실에 투여버디 베시우레샤스로
When you start to look at this presentation, you see how logical it is. It makes sense. It is based on reasons. So not only the Buddha taught the Four Truths, but also when we look at contemporary teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he also emphasized the importance of beginning with the Four Truths. Geshe met His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2019, and he told him about what we do here at the center, the education or the study, the spiritual program here at the center. And he says that he's been teaching the Lamrim, the tradition of the Stairs of the Path of Enlightenment, based on, first of all, the Four Truths. And His Holiness was very pleased with his approach. In some sense, he caressed Geshe, he held his face, and he said that this is an excellent approach to the study of the Stairs of the Path of Enlightenment. First of all, begin with the Four Truths that for us constitute the root of our approach.
데레다 비기 뎀바시 남샤디 안 테바이나 아니 탑단 셰럽싱이디야 아니 뎀바시 토니 연구도 하서로 아니 비기 탑 비기 가서다지 아니 테바 침비기 추세대하게 아니 닌지다 잔주고 샘세야디야 아니 뎀바시 남샤디 아니 심벌 때니 아니 닌지 기초도 연구도 하서 잔주 샘검소 간지 뎀바시 남자 테바이나 타와다 탐지기 공부 여바디야 안 디톤도 줍투고 그랬어. 딘자 다 디직 심바이나 오늘 전에 계란 산길이야 대바치 초마르스 랍진 동라야 멘다준 대바이나 셈나라야 자원이니 아니 교당 투고 말스 로 테마도 지피기 미지기 라바zam기 이치진 로바이나 아니 디 템부차고 말스로 니마치라야 교도야 닌가 빼침보레스 딘즈 신이 대바토바세디 딘디 개침부치 로
And when this presentation of the four truths start to make sense to you, you develop the paths of method and wisdom. So the path of method and wisdom are developed through the four truths. And also when we look particularly at the Mahayana tradition that we follow through the development of compassion and bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, also they are developed in depends upon the four truths. They're needed for attaining the state of liberation and for the state of enlightenment. All these states also come through the understanding of the four truths. And if we develop a deep understanding of the four truths, even at a gunpoint, we're not going to relinquish the trust that we have in them. That will be based upon an understanding which is different to following the words of one individual. So without developing an understanding, if we just follow the words or the explanation of another person, it could be that in a certain situation, things will change and also our trust or faith will also change. But if our trust and faith are based on understanding, that will not happen.
ngabjungagu kawlaya ani chi pigi phe nalolaya ta ani tuzu dukja shabe kabdulaya kongrang pigi mami kita ani mende tene yores kab tudi ani gawrum chi ta charan nyanda sonju khashi nalo sonyores ani domegi tanda ani lamachi geshi chi gegin chi kirwa ani thamadlaya jami chongkhang tik ani pigi ta mazataya thanking master dance sala chiro dig akama chik ani tuzutero chis ani tendo da kama chik tuzute on digi pigi tena jizonama tuji majunro digru dunga ko malu tadar dalam dagi digi dogun tena dember chingila sagi chikdi kyochin ta digsons anta kyaranzu menda kyashos o dindi sonda sra tirda ngazumi shamba jingba no tangi 어 녜직 비기 남비처럼 제시진 땅아 정한레스 디다 마진 약수 삼성 삼시기로 왔어라 디자원이니 매봐 비기 소수 소토라 땅가 여바나야 다디 아니 비기 최고 토라야 교약 로도디 신이 대버트비 까지해서 왔어라
And we say that when you develop understanding, your trust in the Dhamma will not change, even at gunpoint. It's not just saying that. There are recent accounts of certain events that correspond to that. Like, for example, when China took over Tibet, when it occupied Tibet, it experienced tumultuous time for a few decades. And in 1959, when things became really hard and many Tibetans were imprisoned, one teacher from Eastern Tibet, from the Amdo area, was taken to the execution ground. And just before he was executed, he's asked to have just 1 minute so that he can just gather his thoughts. And within that 1 minute, he made a prayer. It's taken from one of the verses of the Guru Puja. I can't remember all the words in as it is translated into English, but it says, please bless me so that all the suffering, negativities and suffering of all mother sentient beings ripen upon me, and may I be able to invest all sentient beings in a state of bliss. So such kind of attitudes come from studying, they come from understanding. And if you develop understanding, if you develop knowledge, and that will give rise to faith, you will never lose courage, you will never lose heart.
당이 통열했음 때 나지도 그 주주 레골 기반자다 든주 야멜이야 아니 다 남조 파유기 당갑 중하고 공기 다 공바 참았더 아니 타와 참아비기 초사매와지 안 소소살랍다 마망길마 땅샤 잠발라 타와 릭직 아니 까도 간다지 쳐봐야냐 비기게 다 타와랑진 데레스로 다 아니 죽주 제단 둔주 까봐 있느냐 아니 다시 큰 쇼가 말했어 아니 다시 큰 맞춰 와 있느냐 그 까걸이야 아니 상와진이 아니 가시 뒤진 아니 신나기 틴딜런로 아니 직 소존 소야가 서버도 제진이 아니 타마델이야 아니 틴 라긴도서 다 공부 좋은디게 참 신도도 지금이 이미지는 공부 좋으려고 여바디 먼저 무슨 통요레스로 들다 진짜 아니 얘는 시 대바토바 지어봐야나 그냥 간다지 쳐봐야냐 아니 샘기 대바디 도구 말했어. 난주 까고라야 지 취치는 팽금문도 물론 팽금문도 삼성기 도바 용야디 아니 소소그 피기 취디 야부지 제마도 같이 니니 취라야 신이 대바토바 메바 디니 토니 아니 에 로다 용데디 겐 디토니 용거라서
Geshe was born in Tibet, in Eastern Tibet, in 1969, and it was still at a time of at the peak of the Cultural Revolution. So, from 1959 onwards, under Communist China, most of the monasteries in Tibet were razed down to the ground. No one was allowed to remain as monastic, so everyone had to relinquish their robes and to join the ranks of ordinary society, and the practice was completely prohibited. So those monastics that, though they were not wearing the robes, was not allowed to wear the robes, they still in the heart did not relinquish the vow. So they used to go in secret, in hiding, to the forest in small communities of monks in order to perform the sojong ritual, which is a ritual or a practice that is done twice a month, which constitute the confession and restoration of one's monastic vow. So they did it in secret, although they were externally, it looks like ordinary people, they still kept their monastic vow. And it was actually quite evident when they died that the passing away was passing away that accorded with their intention. So the point here is that when we say that when you develop a deep sense of trust that is based on understanding, that is based on knowledge, you become so determined in your trust that you will not be swayed away, even at the gunpoint. Whereas if you do not build your faith upon understanding, upon knowledge, it could be that you get to the point in which you think that I've been practicing for a certain duration. I've been making prayers, and yet my prayers are not answered. I don't get what I want. I still experience difficulties. And then you either decide that it is not working out for you, which is the fault. Again, this is the fault of not having faith that is based on knowledge, that is based on understanding, but it can also go even more than that. You can develop even wrong views because your faith is not based on understanding, it's not based on knowledge.
소소거 다 뒤딩 안주다 아니 나 배시 강아 드바니 아니 다 솔런드레디 고츠로스 뒤딩 안주 아니 게 완첸싱이지로 게 완첸디 주구들이야 갸두라야 안주 타상 캠보체스 아니 콘솔 페딩 앞에 시기 아니 겐디 롱창도하고 쉬저다 나ppe 시기로 게임도 참 많이 시기고 롱창으로 아니 게델이야 됐어 도도로 저때 간지 담바도 좀 야고 아니 콩 타마들이야 콩 됐어 뇽도 나도디메 니 아산저 겐저 게 아니 콘조 카시 아니 겐디 됐어 뇽디 겐디 콘조 깨단 대찬 들이 마데스 데우문도 라마초 된 쇼스 라다 콘졸라 말다 콘졸라 라마초스 된 쇼스 아니 딜 라마초 된다 아니 Tena jizon lama tuji chen se sam ledi ngal lenj kias la da ko. Ngi ashanti de ko des trushas la da. Ta konta lama cho chota migi tena jizon lama tuji chen se de les la da. Ko dagara dingo zo da dagara ro da. Konta sama be da hansan da. Ngonne chan chong da ra.
지선 동가라 니만 니시 직송이 봐.
Tsultrim choyaje the logic na. Denka.
지선 동가탄 야네디 가서 야네디 동가라 키기르.
Yarne ro.
네, 디젤라.
Dijela.
So in 1985 or 1986, when Geshe was still in Tibet, that was before he traveled to India, they were allowed again to reinstitute some of the monastic rituals. So for example, one of them was the summer retreat, which lasts for 45 days. Another one was a big prayer session, a talk session that went on for 20 days, and that took place in during autumn. One of the senior teachers at that point was someone called Gen Wanchen, that was known to be quite short-tempered. Geshe was actually quite scared of him, he said. It was quite a fearful person, and it was quite renowned for being short-tempered. He had a thick neck and also very strong voice. So one day he got sick, and then he called other lamas or other teachers and asked them to do some prayers on his behalf. He asked them to recite the Lama Chopa, the Guru Puja, on his behalf. And so he gave a message to Geshe's daddy, uncle. Geshe's uncle, and kind of the message went astray. There was a little bit of confusion over there. But anyway, when he got to the verse in the Guru Puja, and which says, "And now, Venerable Precious Lama, please bless me that all negativities, blah, blah, blah." When he got to that verse, he passed away. It's not a happy ending, is it?
Yeah. Tenero kap duding on the Tasangi omze cheding ju. Senlia tabi sigdro, tabi the Kong Senda. Patadi pe any chawat indokavu. Any namza to the pe, Zamashi, Pewira. The Nimachilaya Kong Yondo. Yondi Tanganzu Kurna de were Robert Sama. Kurna de Kurdiki, Suzugun Dundelaya, Shing Metan such sir. Tina Meshani, they were that Gunga. And Nimachilaya, Tiring it non Sama Sus Lada. Sama Samusachu, Metansa the big touchy Chakos a daughter did shower there. Sama Suchu. And Korangi and a Chugun Namji Nimbach Tusha user, Tikishos Labshi. And did it now Gomozota.
Geshe was born in a nomadic community. He grew up as nomad. So people were living in tents. Now the chant master, the Umtse from his monastery, was called Akutabe. He was always very clean and very neat in the way that he was wearing his robes. Everything was kind of really nicely arranged. One day he also fell sick, and he then asked that first of all the fireplace in the tent will be cleaned. So everything had to be arranged nicely and neatly. So the fireplace had to be cleaned. Also, all the pots and pans and so forth had to be put aside. He asked for his robes, his ritual robes, to be brought to him. So the chugu and so forth, he put them on and passed away.
Then the didn't chugu jagayon sav jelares. Malaya yigi tampo lamginch. The big temdi sud. Any chagelonji kitsalia. Yigi labores. Tanganzora. Pevitati called Sugunre temdi chigor. Yigi tampo lamgi gained meanly a Chileamper cigarettes. Gain Chileamper the Gombo zone the 당한테 남의 참아 하고도 공부 좋니 아니 답이 고동 여러 공부 디고나 덴디 두스마 렌샤데 잠발라 아니 수 공부 덴들 투문스 consciousness dos nem shodas angi gen shimba andi khanda inas genge ani long gipi nenjur shukchembo kom dingi imbaina andi cha sigore sangal
Just again, chinli up at the cellar of a
pelar Geshe do dini keke mare
in the Tedu Kanangala.
ngajagal ya
At some point in time, Geshe made his way from Tibet to India. Now, the person that taught him to write, that's considered actually quite auspicious, right? So you have your first teacher. This is the person that teaches you the alphabet, or this is the person that teaches you how to read and write. So it's considered to be very kind of auspicious or kind of special event in your life. So this person, Gelong Chinle Yarpil, passed away when Geshe was in India. Anyway, Geshe had an account of his passing away, and he had that after he passed away, when his bedsheet was collected under the body, the corpse, it was basically pulled neatly and without any difficulties, as if the body was hovering on top of the mattress, as if it was not even touching the mattress. So kind of it was basically pulling it clean on the corpse. So those are the accounts that Geshe had. And one day I was talking to his teacher and asked him, like, what's the go with that? How is something like that possible? And his teacher said that those things can happen when you have a solid practice of wind yoga.
어디를 딘자 당한 주기 제단 산지기 최대 오늘 단위기 다 믹스 토모 많이 받지 이어받디 야세자탄바레스 다 이나야 디어받디 안주기 필이야 잔 마시바이나 안 디기다 지 가서 디소주기 출래니 네버텐세디 다 문도 아스라 안주 잘라다 마선데 지 피 중간안에 배셔트니 녀샤 여바이나다 녀초르데 띵여야면도 수수 잔치 피기로 아니 좋아 가리 이메디 수수랑이 용고도스 나무다 규모 미 가리 랍데바이나야 원이 타투원디 나무 가리 임바데 규모 가리 임바 치마치인디 랑기 용고도스 어디난신기 아니 산지비 최대야 랑기 장 피기 니 아니 첨지 텐고야지 임바인자 다 장야데 빼마스와 계신부로 레샤스.
Certainly, there are some things which are unique to the Buddha Dhamma. Certainly, there are things that are unique to the Buddha Dhamma. But then, without first of all studying the Buddha Dhamma, we will never come to understand them. We'll never be able to take them up and do it ourselves without developing an understanding. It's like, for example, you might have someone describing to you what sweet means or what sour is. They can give you a very long explanation, but without you experiencing a sweet sensation or a sour sensation, you will never know for yourself what it is. Once you experience a sweet or a sour sensation, then you know exactly what it is. So similarly here, when we think of the experiential knowledge that we develop, it can only come through understanding, through studying and thinking, and then develop that as an experiential knowledge. So such thing cannot be bought up in a shop, right? It's not that you can enter into a shop and ask that someone to sell it to you. You can only develop such an experience, first of all, if you begin with generating an understanding.
Teresa dinza pigi tanganzu tambo pigi ani ta tösum gomsum se tiredosro tambo yakbu ani dan di tenda sam ni ngebitse ta shin jelya tangi shin son slabchine 땅 간주 로종점이면 땅이 신수 슬랍진이 다 샤샤로 저러스 산직 최대 대마인 바시 차위 제려야 다 뷰타르타인지 로 양이 양도 베기 셈나라야 거치니 아니 뷰타르타인디 내가 곰색도 왔다 디 인지미지 로 인지미지 제고도 왔다
So in this way, we follow a process of study, reflection, and meditation. So first of all, we study, we learn. This is to say that we listen to teachings. Then we think about those teachings again and again. And with the conclusion that we draw from those teachings, we put it into our meditation. So at some point, you might think that I understand this point. But it is not enough just to develop an understanding. We cannot leave it just as developing an understanding. With other things in life, we might study a particular topic, and once we come to understand this topic, we might then move on. Here it's different. Once we come to understand a particular point, we then meditate on that again and again.
다 소소로에 남비기다 라마중가 발이야 원내기 대바 두스테온디다 대바 도도 매바치 예 삼삼르치 이어리스로 다 이나야 비 라마중가 비 송두솔이야 베 엔 십사부 돈이 지온디기 아직 라마중가 비 송반만신 아니 지그드베스 라바이나 야차 제주사 지금 매교로치 로 아니 노르데교로치 갑갑갈에 되는 소리도 왔어. 배나 라마춘가 비기 당부 자체 퇴보 마음도 살. 파르도 존로 탐자 담바샤. 타만 연생권도 냠술 랭고를 세디. 디 dom치그래도스. 디 타라. 디 타투고 dom로 디지그래샤스로.
So we do that repeatedly in a meditation so that our understanding becomes more and more refined. So for example, Geshe looks at himself and he says that really he has a deep sense of faith in Lama Tsongkhapa. In that sense, his faith is unshakable, irreversible faith. But still, when he looks deeply into the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa, he can come to see that probably, roughly speaking, 80% of what Lama Tsongkhapa taught are not things that Geshe correctly puts into practice. There are things from Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings that actually Geshe has been doing not in the right way. So, well, if we do it in the right way, then we follow the advice or the example of Lama Tsongkhapa, who said that, first of all, I sought extensive study. Then whatever I studied, those instructions done to my mind as instructions for practice. And then day and night, I made effort in practice.
제 아니 라마 tsongkhapa 지 당부 자체 퇴보 마음도 쌀줄디 아니 shonjig nangla ya di jewa industry song yo mar de ya karson sla di molom thongda mag nangla ya kb kamdun thai song ro la ngomba me bi theba chebar shos ra pigi long den no sum la ya ngoni kishin tbani ding gi gewjig dun la ya rochin pe di tend be ani 다 theba yakbu cheshos 다 ngomba me basla di pe ani nganzu chi khasoda 칼라 야부치 베기 지 나모 그리도지 야부치 가주 세샤바이나 야지 아니 저거 야에 매겨도지 ngom에 매겨도지 어디나지 제진 되버치고레스 케비감도 로 비다 원이 되버 야부치 형이 숑 아니 비다 숑 까붕아 아니 동아 니게 돌아야지 아니 되버 야부치는 간지 로주 야부치 형이 지긴 늘런 dro니 아니 니행고 그레스 되버치고 그래서 통감 따은 탄로질래요.
타래.
어딘데 질래요. 제들 튜브편라 리버시 년다전도 주제라던 삼신들라 삼미총 남줄로에 대좀 쳐버리쇼. 간세신도 사비 추절라 samshunloye ngishinyibi tsinde chon chubi tsondu embaten sujen chibrisho.
Anyway, can't find it now. So Geshe said that it is similar to one of the things that Lama Tsongkhapa said in a prayer for the beginning, middle, and end. And he says that in this prayer, it's found here in this booklet in page 363. One of the verses which I can't find at the moment speaks about developing this attitude in which you aspire to study the teachings of the Buddha and find yourself being insatiable in your study. It begins with, if you have this text in front of you, there's one of the verses that speaks about using the 4 types of reasoning. If you can, if you find it and point it out to me, we can read it together. Anyway, so developing this attitude in which you become completely insatiable with studying the great teachings of the masters. So when you do that, you start to relish the flavor of the Buddha Dhamma to the point in which it's just like Geshe says, partaking of food that is so delicious, so excellent, that you never stop relishing the flavor of that delicious food.
Tima di chanza losan bigba chidrana kebi kamdo tayo sonro la ngombo me tebasho chidar tibitan la riba shi
Talk about number page 365, the second verse. Thank you very much. All right, so page 65 at the top of the page, 365, what did I say? Anyway, 365. I pray that I listen insatiably to countless teachings at the feet of a master, single-handedly with logic unflawed, prizing open scripture's meaning. Having examined day and night with fourfold logic all that I've heard, may I banish every doubt with discerning understanding that arises from such contemplation.
Samshi nela samli chongwaye namjuloye tezum chobarsho. Kanse shundu sabi chuzola samshon loye ngishin yebitsis. And it's sending chonchubi zongrugi embaden tsujin drugor sajdo. All
right. Then it says, so in the second verse in that page, it says, having examined day and night with fourfold logic, all that I've heard, may I banish every doubt with a discerning understanding that arises from such contemplation, with conviction in Dhammas profound, gained from understanding born of contemplation. I pray that I retreat to solitude with a perseverance, severing life's attachments to devote myself to proper practice.
Tenenganzu lamzo tadelaya tedel lamji zo namsamji nenam rangi chijen tobitsi embaten de zongru tobjin tenjin domanyu de drushu pu sonde kanji lenchi me nimelaya nembu shuchin and lamazunga bitin sondo asra.
And also, as the concluding verse in Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal aspects of the path says that once I have found conviction in those essential points, the 3 principle of the path, as Lama Tsongkhapa instructs his disciple, he says, rely upon solitude, rough and generous, kind of loosely speaking, train in those teachings day and night, and accomplish your own purpose, your own goal, my child. With perseverance, accomplish your own goal.
And Lama Tsongkhapa bigi and jigme nimechet, but nembu shuchin. Nganzu bigi kundula yoba in a peshe chargananchin, kuj tujis can to Cherochis, Sevson Nando Asra. Inia Chigio Maros, da Machedi. Lama Tsongkhapa teba yoba inaya Lama Tsongkhapa soma nanshin chig mejo roch kaukola ngangaran la ya chig 껴나로 건조 용도스라 아까 이 드니지 가진 제투고 말에 상성로지.
So these instructions that Lama Tsongkhapa left are poignant, speaking directly to us, to the point in which if you imagine how it would be like to meet him in person, he would, just like sometimes it's happening with his honors, he's going to put his palms together and said, please do as I advise you. So then thinking about it, Geshe says that sometimes when he thinks of what Lama Tsongkhapa says and he sees his failings in not being able to practice in a way that Lama Tsongkhapa instructs us, he really feels disheartened sometimes.
이제 뜻팅하랑 초아시고 그래서랑이 초와도 드리다.
Anyway, these are Geshe's feelings with respect to that.
디지디게 다 간주 퇴섬 곰섬 치고도 라 간 퇴바 맞지 삼바 맞지 비기 다지 곰기하긴 슬라바이나 다 원이 즉 점지 댐비 곰디 용금에봤다 세우슈즈레스 다 내가야 피래야 직 가서다 이 참절 제모치치니 아니 숙작 면소로지 라 페나 드럭소로지 책을 와서라 아니 지 셈바 마이키바 부수도 차원에다 피직 우동내는 소바다 다지 아니 셈 양산질라 바 대바이나 대식 내가 편부로지 마도 원내기 담비게 아니 간주직 동학 짜와 비게 아니 당즈 마리발야 아니 차당라야 뇌야기 곰지 짜원이 잡투고 말아왔으라.
Through a process of study, reflection, and meditation, we want our meditation to bear fruit. But often we see that currently our meditation hasn't reached that stage where it is fruitful. Part of it is because we're using such practices as painkillers, so to speak, in a sense that we have local pain and we're trying to use those practices in order to alleviate those temporary pains. So when we become unhappy, when our mind becomes uptight, we're trying to apply some practices in order to deal with those levels of pains. And then we meditate on things like, for example, the breath, counting runs of breath and so forth, but really without opposing ignorance of grasping at a self, without opposing anger, attachment, and so forth. If we continue to practice without really addressing ignorance, anger, and attachment, our practice will still be limited. It will be just like using painkillers.
picture 기 두시샤진 자나 디그리 손대디 아니 냉가래도스로 탐본이 피길래야지 가야 마싱이질래야 안배 첼럽 전부 요래 찍찍 쇼지레 아니 왕 슈거스란 왕 거바이나야 왕 다코르 트럭 마르스 왕 다코르 만트나 왕 싱이 토베 거르면도스로 아니 지 domba 제바이나야 dom비 줄이야 소더 리게 그 dom바들이야 ninjong dombas lagore ani chi ninjong pigilaya ani ninjong kitsu gu samlo laya khotsa mebaina ani ninjong kandas ani domba kandas kigers pe khaburedos dele tambo pa ya ngoni lamngenjige lap jangenjige jang yagbu simbaina ta ti tolaya ani zugdren karchebaina ya ro ani saji damasunda saji pi tempo yabu chize ti tolaya kamba tozi gyatama gyagene kyogdo asro o disoro 담보 시대 가서 최장야 뒤에 마시바 계신부.
We create a foundation in terms of our study. And when we study, as his owner says, it's not that we need from the very beginning to rely upon a spiritual teacher, to be devoted to a spiritual teacher. We can relate to a spiritual teacher, the one that teaches us at the beginning as a virtuous friend, as a Dhamma friend. So sometimes we hear about teachers, they're described as very powerful. They have great blessings. If you receive an empowerment from that person, it's going to be very powerful. But really, if we don't create the foundation for that, how it's going to work out for us. Like, for example, in order to receive an empowerment, we need to understand the messages or the indications that are conveyed to us by the master that is giving the empowerment. And without understanding what we need to do, an empowerment cannot be obtained. Or if you take upon yourself a vow, from the 3 layers of vows, we begin with the pratimoksha vows, the vows of personal liberation. So the underlying motivation for taking upon yourself such a vow, the pratimoksha vow, is to become determined to emerge from cyclic existence, to live cyclic existence. So if you don't understand what it is it that you need to develop as a motivation? What does it mean to emerge from samsara? What does it mean to be determined to do that? If you don't have that, how will it work out in terms of taking the vow? You're not going to begin with, you're not going to have the requisite motivation. So therefore, and that's going to be, and that being the case, it's going to be difficult to actually generate the vow in your mind stream. So in order to make sure that we proceed well, we first of all study, we train, we study, we lay the foundation for building a high-rise building of our spiritual progress. Yeah. Chris? All right, you are wondering if Geshe can clarify what the fourfold logic are. Dila Rikpa Nambashi Sajdo, di Kandechinas.
다주 비기 텐디기 지발라 소바 아니 뚜두기 지바 테베 지바 안 가르사 디소레스.
So the fourfold reasoning are reasoning of nature, reasoning of dependency, reasoning of function, and logical reasoning. Do you agree, Jampa? Sorry? Okay, you forgot about it. Maybe that's the 5th one, reasoning of forgetfulness. Where can you read up on that? Dila Repa Nambashi dito la terchik tana pichik tana karitana yagares.
Ngicharan lexinimbo. Charan lexinimbo inchigal yo luyus lambas. Lexinimbo na yours.
So, Chris, you told Geshe before that you were reading through Lama Tsongkhapa's Essence of Eloquence, right? So it's fun in this text. Yeah, it is. It's like, can we have an easier text? Where in the text? Still Tawo Shu Resa. The Kanan Kawa Yoba the Changyana.
미기게 대결한 신나 샘 잠비기 남rik 잠는 죽죽 가려야 직송요레스. 아니 엄마 탕기비기 가지 갑둘라 아니 내무친 순거레스.
So as far as Geshe remembers, there is a section that explains why the Chittamatrins are given the name mind only, or mere cognition, and then it joins with a section of the refutation of the object of negation done by the middle way consequence school of thought, the Madhyamika Prasangika.
tenjaran yana des chiglela dan lama jizum bagi ani parchen nalola ya chigtura koyi marra
ani lama jizum ban
chigtura kadula
de chigtura sana pechagi menya mana de
chigtura
Okay,
demba medi seja o dikhabdel chigsungores
ani lama jizum ba di departing it. Now, another one that might be available in English, could be available somehow through the FMTs, Jitsumpa's, the translation of Jitsumpa's general meaning of the ornament. So in the first chapter of the ornament of clear realization, there's a certain part in which a refutation of being one or many is provided. So that's probably also in relation to, in the commentary of that section, you can find the fourfold reasoning. De la data kasa da chawagi ripa temba de mindrachi res.
So the
Pena peje Quran de tende de kewashi gawos.
Did this logar was the dagi kawat.
Yeah, it is different to the fourfold refutation that Chandrakirti presented. I told Geshe that I assume that you refer to the four limits of production, or the four alternatives of production that Chandrakirti displayed in his supplement to the Middle Way. So if this is what you refer to as the refutation of Chandrakirti, then yes, it is different. So we have complicated points, difficult points. If particularly you persist with those difficult points, you make effort, you get, the reward that you get for that is great. When we grapple with some points which are complicated and we stick with that, and we at the end we do manage to unpack them, we get the benefit of also understanding other points that are more simple than that. So just by the virtue of working hard on one particular complicated point, you can come to understand many other things that are simpler than that.
Nibalini Dembalan Jubu Kodamba Jamro Jama, Teletamji Zawa Ichi Tabakeva, Tambola Shi Kalatin Jabs to you, Teletin Jabs to you, Chitamji Jabsun Sul, Jabsun Labachi Rambao. Tamboni Chir Gur Mayan, didn't Hashabatar, send the Medeva, you the Chivata, Shivi Odia, Kam to Kivala, Ramamage, Lady Shamaji Yela, Lake John Julie, Cheddar Simumana Turuna, Lord Yuki Ram, Dembatar. 대신 상균투의 자람나 지대선은 로드 탄간종 대대 개원냠중 년랐다 대버톱진 신도 메세바 시송바따 까빌레 톱총시 나빌레 신도 톱체비 난로롱이 출산비 난론 직시 군졸라 텔리큐비 니버여 이치바니 이노스.
Well, since we haven't done any reading today of the text, let's make sure that we do some. So we're looking at relying on the methods for the happiness of future lives, consisting of 2 points: training in going for refuge, the holy gate for entering the teachings, and the root of all well-being, generating faith of conviction in actions and their effects. Now, when we begin with the first point, which is training in going for refuge, the holy gate for entering the teachings, there are 4 main points to this section. The causes that going for refuge depending on them, the objects you go for refuge. The third is the way in which to go for refuge as much as possible. And the last is the states of training after having gone for refuge. Now, when we begin with the causes that going for refuge depends on, it says, although in general, there are many causes, here it is the fact that, as explained above, we do not stay in this life, but soon die. And that after death, we do not have control over where we will be reborn under the power of our karma. Karma is also set forth in engaging in bodhisattva behavior, Shantideva's text, in which he says, as a flash at night amid the clouds illuminates the darkness for a moment, likewise, on the road through the power of Buddhas, a rare understanding of merit comes forth in the worldly. Therefore, that which is virtuous is always weak, while bad deeds are strong and quite unbearable. Thus, Lama Tsongkhapa says, by thinking about how you will fall into the lower rebirths because the power of wholesome karma is small and that of unwholesome karma is extremely strong, the two arise. Fear of the lower rebirths and the conviction that which is rare and precious, the jewels, can protect you from them.
세시로 제거 지려야 깔부 레톱 총신 나부 레톱 치어셋 디 칸더스 유리언 미시라 디 디레야 테스트 십자로 제거다스라.
Now, one thing to pull out from this section is related to karma. It says, therefore, that which is virtuous is always weak, while the bad deeds are strong and quite unbearable. And there in the commentary, it says, by thinking of how you will fall into the lower rebirths because the power of wholesome karma is small, and that of unwholesome karma is extremely strong. So that probably requires some clarifications.
테나 깔빌레 톱 총그레 나빌레 톱 체레 다가란 규르데. 디 nganzugi nganzu semlaya tagni ro ngada ngadri semlaya tagbaina nganzugi kabile khazus chigdo nagbile khazus chigdo slabaina kyo thomam danda bhardo mang chedi le megiwe kanji nyumum bi shawand drive madobege ani chi kabi gewale chedi pe nyonyong chadoas tinza top chongares lagores kanji 아니 디 톱체존 디 마뇽 찬이 샤고레스 로 먼저 샘을 뛰는 마뇽 찬이 샤고르마도 지당 제바이나 아니 수익 톱체스라나 가빌레드 톱체하다 나빌레드 톱총아레스 간선이 깨워 통음에만 단답을 싸샤비기 나부 미기비 레디 땡델야치 아니 뒤주통동 지나노래 까부 개와지 레사와는 디기 점투기어레스 인제 그 숙체버렸어. 이는 단다 또 총어서야디 만용찬이 시고랬어.
So one thing that we can clarify with respect to what this section says, the power of wholesome karma is small and that of unwholesome karma is extremely strong. So we can assess that based upon our own mind. So really when we check what's happening to us in our own mind, when we look at virtuous and non-virtuous state of mind, which one of them predominates, we can see that we have more non-virtuous states than virtuous states. So from the point of view of just quantities, the power of unwholesome actions predominates. But in general, when we just compare between virtues and non-virtues and wonder which one of them is stronger, then we can see how virtues become stronger than non-virtues. In a sense that since down without beginning and up until now, though we have accumulated a lot of negative karma, unwholesome, non-virtuous actions, still on the basis of having a precious body, which is a rebirth that lasts for, in the great scheme of things, for a very short time, we can generate virtue that will destroy non-virtues that we have accumulated over so many lifetimes before. So in that sense, you can say that virtuous actions are stronger than non-virtuous actions, but still looking at our own mind and assessing the quantities of virtues and non-virtues, we can see how virtue is weak and non-virtue is strong. So we will leave it here for now. In our next session, we're going to look at the 2 causes for going for refuge, and then the 3 refuges, the 3 jewels. That's next week. Stay tuned. So with that, we're going to leave it here for today, and we'll end this session for today with Lama Tsongkhapa's prayer for the final Lamrim prayer. For my 2 collections, vast in space, that I've amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path that I have discerned them. May I hold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, and I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a very long time by even this graded path enlightenment completed due to the wondrous victorious conduct of the Buddhas and their son. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never departed in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Thank you so much.